Hello, friends. We are in a troubling time when it comes to misinformation. The views of our guests do not reflect that of my own. This show is for entertainment purposes only, and any information presented during this show is a live-action role-play scenario. All that being said, enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Dammegard. First, a couple of announcements. Be sure to watch the Forbidden documentary, A Cult Louisiana, available on Tubi and multiple streaming platforms. Also, you can get a Rokfin premium membership at rokfin.com/FKN+. Always be sure to download our podcast episodes directly through Spreaker. And we are booking guests for February. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Also, be sure to check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. It's also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, where we feature some incredible podcasts with some of your favorite creators. Today I want to welcome back to the show Dammegard. He is an author, international speaker, former journalist, musician, artist, and investigator. Welcome back. How you doing?
Thank you, Chris. I'm doing great, and Happy New Year to you and everyone who's
Yes,
listening.
happy to.
I really think that I normally say this, that this year we're going to turn it around and make
Oh,
it the
man.
best year ever. And I keep saying that. I will say it this year as well. We have this minor bump in the road called the New World Order, but once we transcend that, hallelujah, baby. First cold beer on me, and let's
I'm
celebrate.
with you, man. I have high hopes. I always have, and I think there's just a few of these dark parasites that we need to scrape off the surface of the planet, and things would be a lot better. But today we're going to discuss the dark history surrounding some of the most iconic rock musicians from the 60s and 70s, and the possible intelligence operations fueling the Laurel Canyon music scene. It would seem that many of the legendary musicians from that era may have been part of culture creation operations. This is very fascinating. I'm very much looking forward to getting into your research about this. Before we do, just remind the audience where they can find your work.
My website is dammegard.com with double M and one A, dammegard.com. It also is lightonconspiracies.com. It's been that for conspiraciesplural.com for forever and ever, but now that word has been hijacked, or that name. So if you go to Google, you put in Light on Conspiracies and just do a search there, you will see that it's my name and a government podcast. What the hell is that? And my ordinary name, oledammegard.com. It's if you could check that one, it's goes to some bizarre website, massive big website in El Paso, Texas. So yeah, anyway, I just want to say there's lots of Rumble channels in my name, not me, YouTube channels. My ones have been censored so many years ago and shut down. So all of these things that are popping up in different areas, very few of them are actually me. So if I say stupid things, well, I do that normally as well, but otherwise than that, please take it a little bit like that if I say stuff that it might not be me saying it. Anyway, so that's where you can find me. Light on Conspiracies. There's more than 1,300 interviews with yours truly. Hundreds of podcasts, webinars, you name it, about 6,000 articles. yeah, you can stay there for years if you want to. And I have done my absolute utmost to that every single item that is on that website, which is sort of like almost my whole life pushed into a website, that it is based on truth as far as as far as I understand, and as far as I see what truth is, then it's there.
Excellent.
So it's not easy these days to know what is true and what is
Oh, it's
not.
definitely
So
some
yeah,
murky
so
waters to
and
navigate through.
whoa, and especially now when AI comes in and with or I mean, I'm sure they've had access to this technology for a long time, which has now been shared with us. But if you look at all the news footage and audio and whatever, we have to be very careful just because Putin says something. I mean, nowadays you can use TikTok stuff and just swap faces with people and change your voice, making you sound like Mike Tyson. It's like scary. And I just want to point out that, for instance, if you go to um, I think it's CBS, everything that CBS does, if you go on YouTube and check it out, then you got contact CBS for whatever, inquiries, all of these things with links. And then when it comes to licensing for the videos, there's no link, but there is Veritone. It's called Veritone. So you have to look at, you can't click on it, but you have to look it up. Once you look it up, it's a website for auto-generated news and
Oh,
media.
wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, what? So please check that out. And also look how CBS News is also connected to Paramount Pictures.
Mm, mm,
What? So in the links below, what we are being fed as news, we're connected to a massive big movie company that creates stuff out of nothing, and also Veritone that creates AI auto-generated news feeds and media, including footage that looks unbelievable true. So when you see alleged mass shootings or alleged terror attacks or whatever, and people are being interviewed is it even true? Is it even true? That's what I'm asking all the
mm,
time. Yeah, that sounds really pretty goddamn awful because it's always awful. That you can for sure. If it's them, it will be awful because the thing is for them is to generate fear. That's the thing. It's like normal marketing, but the product is fear.
mm.
So
The media
yeah,
and
so
intelligence has had relationships, symbiotic relationships, since the beginning of some of these institutions, and it allows them to control the narrative. And when it comes to things like the Laurel Canyon music scene, it seems like every major cultural movement that has potential to be beneficial to humanity is quickly infiltrated by these shadowy factions and steered in directions that are destructive to humanity. So, where did you begin when trying to understand these conspiracies behind our music entertainment business and this culture creation that occurred?
thank you for bringing me back to Laurel Canyon. And where did that begin? I have no idea. I just know that I mean, I've been down this rabbit hole for almost 45 years now. My God, what happened? But when the the longer I've been in this area, the wider it has become. And because for me, it was top political assassinations, but then that started spreading out false flags, and then how to manipulate the population. All of it goes hand in hand. And so the areas that soon were areas that to catch my interest was the music business, the film industry, and media, because that are main areas, main arenas for them to get into our mind, into our head when they can mess with us. So they put a lot of effort to infiltrate these areas. And nowadays, if you look at Hollywood, it's like, is there anything not controlled? Is there anything released that has not been approved by the Pentagon first? It's like, what? rom-coms and stuff like, yeah, approved by Pentagon. And the music, I mean, now I'm not, it's not me saying it. There's so many of these individuals that are on the inside. I listen to people on the inside. They are saying the same thing, that the music business is very, very, very
Mm-hmm.
dark, very dark, and that is connected to some very dark things. It seems like almost that many of them are signing this contract not with a record label, but with a guy with the horns and who eats with a fork and has this red
Right.
complexion. Their words, not mine. Their words, not mine. That they signed a deal with the devil. That is what they say. Okay, so we have these areas where, if that is true, and if this has been going on for a long time, because if you listen even back to the blues music, in the 30s, 40s, like that, there's this theme that he went down to the crossroads and signed a deal with the
Soul to
devil,
soul.
sold his soul to the devil. This is from the like the 30s. You have these, I can't remember this guy who couldn't play the guitar hardly. He went down to the crossroads, disappeared, came back, and was absolutely the best guitarist ever in the 1930s. I can't remember his name, but he's one of these and everybody was like, what happened?
Robert
What
Johnson.
happened? And there you go. Thank you so much. Robert Johnson, the guy with
Yeah.
the hat and the guitar. He came back and he just knew it all. And he played the way that just got people in. This is the thing. When you connect with whatever the devil is, if that's an energy or if it's, I'm still confused to what that
Mm.
is. If it's an entity or a real thing, or I don't know. But uh, what it is, it's very like, just like the snake in paradise, eat the apple, eat. It's very like, it will suck you in. And this is where it's dangerous, because they're very charismatic. The people that makes these deals. The thing is, it's here. I live in Bali, and here it's very, very true. They don't know anything about Hollywood
Mm.
or anything, not at all. But here, if you want to become successful, not a problem at all. All you have to do, sign a deal with the devil and sacrifice a relative. That's it. Boom. Sacrifice a child, whatever, and success is in your pocket. That is part of daily life here. So I find that interesting, to live in a society where that is actually the truth, instead of just a speculation about some industry far away. So anyway, so over the years, I've seen that so many are talking about the same things, and then in that area, I started seeing very weird things when it came to rock stars and rock bands, and not, but then it going into the pop industry, into that whole thing where it's like, what is going on here? Because this is more and more looking like a factory
Mm.
line, that there's some kind of industrial production, which is very obvious now with boy bands and girl bands and whatever. It's very out in the open that that's how they do it. They pick one cute, one sweet, one bad, one black, one white, one Chinese, whatever. So there's anything for everything for. There's something for everyone. Just like when they put together the identity of Barack Obama, anything for. There's something for everyone. That. But then when you start going back, and this is where we're coming back. I'm sorry for being a
Oh,
bit
you're
like
good.
long-branded, but so to bring it back, we have this thing in the early 60s that just revolutionized music and just made the whole thing explode like never before. And I would strongly suggest that I made many. Have we talked about the Beatles
No,
on
we
your show?
haven't. You briefly mentioned it last time,
Okay.
but we didn't get into it.
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
do that next time. But and I want to say, to start with, I am sorry to be the bringer of bad news. Please let the music speak for itself. But there are things we have to look at, especially since it's how it's being used. That's when I'm like, whoa. So sorry to be the bringer of bad news, but the truth is the truth, whatever that means. So Kennedy was killed, boom, November 22nd in 63. And it took like the world was in massive shock when that happened. When people started scratching their heads saying, wait a second, there's something very bizarre going on here because that doesn't match, that doesn't make any sense at all what's going on. So some people started looking in that direction. Right when that happened, she loves you, yeah, 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 on that side of the Atlantic. And suddenly, remember, in those days, there weren't like the media wasn't this big. It was like very limited. In most countries, there was one channel, state-owned channel, TV channel, maybe two. And then there were countries like yours where it's just like there was in already in those days, I think there were loads. But anyway, so instead of away from this horrible traumatic thing with Kennedy, suddenly in came She Loves You, yeah, yeah, Beatlemania, the whole thing where the world was shocked by the haircut of this. What that will, I'm just mentioning that because that, please understand how naive a, a population had to be shocked by a haircut like that. That is, I mean, they were even in suits, but it was the haircut. They had identical haircuts. So when you look on that side of the Atlantic, and then you have this side of the Atlantic, the Europe and the US, what happened more or less at the same time as Beatles appeared, and I would strongly suggest that Beatles is not a band that was just appeared out of nowhere, but it was actually a creation of the Tavistock Institute.
Ah,
They did not write their own songs. I'm very sorry to say, but they were amazing. I can back this up big time. Please let me come back to you next
yeah,
show. We do the
definitely.
Beatles. And but in 5 years, 5 years only, that is not a lot of years. From 64, the beginning of 64 to 69, we have She Loves You, yeah, yeah, ending with Lucy in the Skies of in the Sky of Diamonds, LSD, hippie movement, acid trips, Monterey festivals, all of that in 5 years, from people being shocked by this to make love, not war, painted on your belly, you know, running around dancing, flower power, this whole thing, Jimi Hendrix. In 5 years, can you imagine? So what
Mm,
happened? What happened? Because in the 60s, there was a reason why they took out Kennedy. I mean, Kennedy hadn't even, his body hadn't even become cold before Johnson signed the order that actually started the Vietnam War actively on the American part. This was a French war, a drug war, not against drugs, but it was based around drugs to push it into the West. But anyway, so massive amount of money involved. And so the people behind that war was very, very aware of the problem with the young generation. You know, if they start getting involved, we have a problem here because at the in the mid 60s, you almost had a civil war in the U.S. You had like there was almost apartheid. I would call it apartheid in the U.S. You know, black and white, where this whole thing was just brewing, and then you had the Vietnam War. And then you had all kinds of stuff going on as well with riots and just people were fed up. So you had this powder keg that was about to explode. How can you deal with that? How can you defuse something like that?
yeah.
Drugs. Drugs, drugs,
Mm,
drugs. So how, look at the COVID, look at all of these operations. How do you get people to take the drug?
mm,
Whatever that drug is, if it's a jab or if it's LSD or if it whatever it is, How can you get them to take it? You have to get into their mind. And so mind control, people think mind control is like somebody sitting in a chair tied down, being dripped in their eyes and watching horrible things. Yeah, true. But there are also much more subtle things that just comes into your mind and just takes over without you even knowing it. That is the key functionality of the Tavistock Institute. If you don't know about the Tavistock Institute and you are sort of interested in what's going on in your life, check it out. I would very snug. Tavistock. And these are like scientists and Nazi type of people in the background. You never hear about them, you never see them, and they affect your life in a massive way. Right now, they're the ones making transgender thing, this whole liquid gender type of thing, normal. The things that would be like for Monty Python not that long ago, where people would laugh and, oh my God, how stupid is that, is now normal. How did that happen? The Tavistock Institute. How did the 60s happen? The Tavistock Institute. Both sides of the pond, you know. So we had Beatles and the Rolling
Yeah.
Stones coming in Europe. If you look at this almost as a military operation, I would suggest boom, boom. On the other side of the Atlantic, suddenly in 64, 65, the rock scene in the US exploded. And all of these incredible bands just appeared, like the Doors, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Jefferson
Yeah.
Starship, whatever their name was. You had Crosby, Stills, and Nash. You had Joan Baez. You had so many of these incredible bands that just came and boom. So interesting. I mean, that's amazing. It was a time, this was the time when creativity was let loose. Yeah, okay, let's go for that one. So we start looking into where did all of these bands come from? Because at the time, in the early 60s, you had the major music scenes were not in Los Angeles at all. At all. There was no music scene there, no clubs, no nothing. They were in New York, you had Nashville, you had Memphis, and I think that's about it. The major ones, not in Los Angeles at all. So, but when you look at all of these bands, where did they come from? Los Angeles. And more precisely from a tiny, tiny, tiny little place called Laurel Canyon. Okay, that is odd. But anyway, so we have this, it's northwest, let me see here, northeast of Hollywood, up in the mountains. There's some winding roads up like a hilly area. Not many buildings. I mean, this is not a city. It's hardly a town. It's more like spread out houses. In those days, spread out houses like that. And for some reason, we had all of these people, future rock stars, and future very famous musician in that whole thing were drawn out of like a magic magnet to Laurel Canyon. You had Frank Zappa, his big wooden house was the center of that whole thing. Okay, so all of these people came to that area. When you hear interviews with them, they're like, yeah, it was just like amazing. We would just, we just came down the road. I was hitchhiking and there was Frank Zappa picking me up. Like, what? Yeah. Yeah. And I was just driving down, hiding out because I was avoiding my military duty, like that. And I was hiding out in Laurel Canyon. Okay. That's good for you. Okay. So all of these people came there somehow untouched by what was going on in society when everybody else was being drafted to the Vietnam War. All of these ones that were saying like this to society, you would think, let's send them first. Nope. They just somehow managed to, yeah. And then all of these ones came to this place called Laurel Canyon. Well, it's amazing. I can suddenly sometimes things happen, you start something and people are drawn to it. But what was very, very, very odd is that in the center of this tiny little community is a CIA base called Lookout Mountain Air Force Base. Okay. So you're telling me that all of these outlaws, these outcasts of society, all of them, let's find a place to hide out, to hide away, to just do our stuff, do a lot of drugs, do a lot of whatever. Yeah, next door to an CIA massive base. Does that make any sense to you? I'm like, I would avoid that place if I were them, but here it's the exact opposite. And the Lookout Air Mountain Air Force Base, it was a former Air Force base, but it was like a CIA headquarters. It was a massive, massive center for film production. They had film studios up there, and they produced, according to the information that has come out, they produced more movies and films than Hollywood
Hmm.
at the time. Have you ever seen anything that you know came out of that studio?
Weren't they also the ones that
What,
produced these nuclear bomb test recreation videos?
this is not officially, but I would strongly suggest
Yeah.
so. And if you believe in these A-bomb things,
Hmm.
ask yourself when you see this whole thing, when the explosion is there and all of these houses are being like that, what was the camera
I know,
standing
right?
on?
It's pretty
I
ridiculous.
mean, the camera doesn't even
Yeah.
move. And was that some kind of titanium building, unbelievable, whatever? How is that even possible? We can go into this whole thing, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, why the bridges standing? Why were all the concrete things
Yeah.
standing, but all of the else burnt down? It When you start looking into this and you start using logic, normal logic, I'm sorry, you're in for a ride because it's like, what are you saying? Because I've been told this, and then it doesn't match up. So something must go be wrong here. But let's get back to Laura Cannon. Please, Chris, when you hear me go off, you just pull me back
Right.
in. Okay, so we had Frank Zappa. I'm still confused about why Zappa, because I mean, he was so anti establishment, all of these things, speaking out so openly about it. And yet he was in the exact position where he was doing the opposite. It's almost like Elon Musk, you know. So anyway, his house it was the big, massive wooden house, and all of these future rock stars came there. The thing that is interesting with more or less all of them is that their parents were somehow connected to American
Military.
military, industrial thing. Many of them had grown up on Air Force bases. Many of them, their parents were involved with chemical warfare, MK Ultra also. They were also involved in yeah.
Wasn't Jim
So
Morrison's father
many of
involved with the Gulf of Tonkin
yeah, yeah,
incident?
yeah. Not involved. He was the person. He was the I think he was an admiral. He was the head of the warship that is said to have been
Hmm.
attacked. He got this is interesting because Jim Morrison and him were like two on each side of this of a fence, but working actively at the same time, I would say. And the day that Jim Morrison died, his father retired. So they appeared on stage, they did their job, and they disappeared out of the radar. There's many big question marks around Jim Morrison's death. But anyway, Jim Morrison is one of these very iconic individuals uh, that appears. And I want to say also, my friend Dave McGowan, he was the guy that really got me onto what was going on Laura Canyon. Unfortunately, he died Why he died, I mean, I have big question marks around his cancer, but he was an incredible researcher. So a lot of this should be dedicated to him. But anyway, so Jim Morrison, for instance, and the Doors were all of these people were pulled into this tiny little area, met up in the house of Frank Zappa, and like Jim Morrison, he came with a stack of paper, the lyrics to all of these songs. He was never seen to write anything. He was this poet. Nobody ever saw him write anything after. He never wrote any additional songs. Many of the bands that came there couldn't even play. So they were handed instruments and amplifiers. Who gave them that? They were signed with CBS. CBS at the time were very anti anti-establishment individuals officially, and yet they were setting the whole thing up, studio time, all of these things. Who were playing on the records of all of these bands? Very few of the people we're told. Instead, there were studio musicians in the
Yeah.
background, including the Beatles. I'm going to come back to that. But you had, for instance, there's this incredible woman. Her name is Carol Kay, I think, a bass player. She has played on hundreds of these albums, including the Beach Boys. All of these things where you say, "Oh, it's Jefferson Starship." No, it's not. That's Carol Kay. That's the drummer. What's his name? Birdie Pursue is another studio musician. Many of these musicians that Elvis used also were used on these band's records because they sounded awful. They couldn't play. But in those days, the stages weren't big. And when they became big, like Monterey, Woodstock, these were the first ones that opened up for this whole thing. The sound system was awful. I mean, people couldn't really hear anyway, and most of the time, many of them were screaming or they were high on acid. Where did the acid come from? Thousands of pills were being distributed for free when they entered into the area. Who was so kind to hand out these acid trips? That we come back to the Lookout Mountain Air Force Base in that is one of also where the distribution of the drugs came from the CIA. Why would they do that into these areas? Because they wanted the young generation to be absolutely off their head and not concentrate on problems like the Vietnam War, a multi-million-dollar business, and the drug trade, absolute incredible business, that whole thing. That's one of the reasons. So get them the attention away and just mess their mind up and mess families up and all of that so that they would start focusing on arguing with each other and having all of these fights there instead of focusing on who is actually causing the real problems in society, which was behind the scenes. So you had Crosby, Stills, and Nash, for instance, with also the parents in military-industrial complex. You had Frank Zappa himself. You had, many of these bands were pushed together. The Monkees, as far as I know, was actually the first band that was publicly said to have been put together.
Yeah.
And do you know one of the guys who was auditioning for the Monkees? Do you know who that was? Charles Manson.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. You're hearing about that, yeah.
Charles Manson. Can you believe it? I mean, you have to say that God has got a sense of humor because, like, what? But out of Laurel Canyon, not only did we have this incredible, like, industrial pump of musicians coming out and then really, taking over the music business, and suddenly LA became this music center, a whole new creation that was not heard of before, really starting also to compete with the European scene. Then we had the English invasion of the US, where Beatles went over, and that opened up the door for this whole thing. And so, yeah, a lot of things were going on. And like I said before, from She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, to Lucy in the Sky of Diamonds, in 5 years, something has to be massively pushed in the background to from being scared and shocked by the haircut of Beatles to Jimi Hendrix.
Mm.
The experience with Jimi Hendrix, that is, it's like stepping on board of a moon rocket if you believe that they actually got there. But I mean, like a dragster, let's put it like that instead, like massive moving forward.
So it's most likely that most of these groups weren't even a legitimate band at one point and were infiltrated by these groups. They were created from the bottom up.
I think that what they had in common was not that they were good musicians. What they had in common was that they had parents in the military-industrial complex. That was where they were picked, handpicked. That was where I think from a young childhood that they were being possibly put through different type of things to prepare them, not because it. What is really interesting also is like you have one. Like it's almost like a vein coming from that core becoming rock stars. Then you have another vein from the exact same core becoming serial
Yeah.
killers. And
Yes.
this is like, what on earth are you talking about? But we see from the very same core, you have this thing where, so it's almost, I would suggest that we have the same power behind getting into the mind of people, and then another one getting into the fear of
Mm.
people, and then these two can be played against each other and do all kinds of stuff. With the serial killers, I find it super interesting. And Dave McGowan, once again, he was amazing. He was the guy that really got into this whole thing. Uh, with the serial killers, what I found is that serial killers more or less only exist in the US until later on. That is interesting. And as far as I know, very few before the 1950s, as far
It
as I
seems like
know.
there was a certain
And now,
era where serial killers were more prominent. Even now, you don't hear much about it. It's like they served their purpose for that particular time period.
I completely agree with you. And what is very odd with these serial killer, we're being told, if you look at true crimes and all of these things, that a serial killer, for some reason, is somebody who just loves to kill people. Okay, more or less all of them hear voices. What is that? You have to ask yourself, what is that? Is that like a psychiatric disease? Possibly, but it's also exactly the symptoms of MK Ultra treatments and what they do. There's a lot of self-harm nowadays where young kids are having these voices in their head also: hurt yourself, hate yourself, kills, doing all of these things, voices. Nowadays we have it's very out in the open. It's called voice to skull
Mm.
technology that can be transmitted in very and pinpointed at specific individuals also. And and if you look at but if we back to this whole thing with the serial killers, you have these people. Some of them are psychopaths for sure, born psychopaths, so they would be perfect for this also. And maybe some of them are real serial killers. I'm not saying anything about that they were inspired by other, but the phenomena of serial killers appeared, as far as I know, around the same time as we had this whole explosion in the music business. And one thing, like we see these documentaries about serial killers and all, and most of them have sort of like a preferred method of how to do stuff. Some people use a knife, some people strangle, some people whatever it is that they have. And also, if you look at these documentaries, oh, they made a knot in a very specific way, and the forensic detectives got on track. I mean, because of the knot, and then they got him because of the knot, because he always made the knot. Or they have this ritual about spreading out the clothes or putting the body in a specific position or whatever, that is almost like a signature. Like they talk about the serial killer's signature.
Mm.
So if you look at some of these serial killers that has been uh, taken, like Ted Bundy, other people like that also, when you check out their track record, this is the death score that was dedicated to this person. So you have, for instance, many times horrendous violence, slash, 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 like 48 stab wounds. Yeah, that shows that he hated his mother or whatever, slaughterhouse, slaughterhouse. Next one, slaughterhouse. Random victims like 14-year-old, 92-year-old, nothing really like, whoa. I'm not saying everyone because other people had their specific types, but there's some of these ones where you have just random violence. It looks like random, random. This is also the CIA strategy of tension. That is exactly random violence to freak out the society. And then you have slash 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 slash, and suddenly there's like a 22 headshot, headshot, even the dog headshot, and then back slash 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 headshot, 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 slash 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 slash. What is going on here? And I would strongly suggest what we're looking at are uh, horrendous acts of violence to cover up some real death.
Mm.
And these deaths, when you look at the victims there, are very often involved in things of a competitor character to the CAA, to the drug trade, to other stuff like that. So I think the real victims are pum pum. Here we go in, CIA hit, 22 uh, silencer, even the dog, like pum 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 pum, dog pum pum, like that. They're out of business. Covered up, slash 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 slash, pum pum, and then cover up. Look at these things. Don't buy into it just because. And I have also some testimonies from some extreme mass murderers that I've been part of exposing. There's especially two of them that have committed around 1,000 killings each. Many of these killings are to cover up for big assassinations. You have like around the Kennedy assassinations, depending on what research you look into, but there's about, I would suggest, around 300 very odd deaths or things where people have died in unnatural circumstances around the JFK. Then you have MLK, then you have RFK, then you have many of these other ones where people surrounding these conspiracies, pum, 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 because for some reason they know too much or they've seen too much. I'm not talking about these people being involved in the act itself, but maybe they're married to someone or they overheard or they that, and suddenly the thing is, shut them down, shut them down. So who are doing these things? We're back to these type of individuals that are doing the wet work. They go in and they silence people. They make it look like suicide, car accidents, you name it, drowning accidents, whatever it is, somebody's doing it. We're talking about the exact same people that are also carrying out some of these horrendous acts of violence, then blamed on a serial killer, where you often have one lone patsy, I would suggest, many times a patsy that is just like, when you listen to them, they're not home. They're like they don't know what they're talking about. They can't remember. They have no recollection.
Makes
So
me think of
once
Charles
again, the
Manson. He
patsies.
seems like the perfect example for
The,
this, right?
and here we come into that. That was the reason I got into this area because Charles Manson, he's the worst mass murderer ever.
Mm.
Correct?
So they say.
No,
So they say.
no, he didn't
Right,
kill
he didn't kill
anyone.
anyone. Yeah.
He didn't kill. He wasn't even
Mm-hmm.
there when it happened. When and that whole thing. So where did that happen? This slaughterhouse of a mass murder, they say, of Sharon
Mm-hmm.
Tate was in a villa in Laurel Canyon.
Yeah.
That also is a very, very weird thing. I put massive question marks around that. I have photos from the crime scene where it's like, this is so weird. I mean, you have the corpses are smiling. It looks like a stage, like a film set that has just been made to look really gruesome.
Mm.
Please also know, remember Sharon Tate was married to Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski is a film director. You know, they filmed Rosemary's Baby, this horrendous thing, in the same building where John Lennon was murdered outside, the Dakota building in New York. There's very weird stuff, and also very often connected to the movie industry, Disney, and so on, because that is where the illusions are created. Very connected to the CIA or different alphabet agencies. The thing is, he was not even there. He had created this sect, they said, where there were these five, six individuals involved. One of them very connected to Doris Day, the singer Doris Day, her son. And he was just, there were a lot of assets going on and also different kinds of weird stuff, which resulted in the end of the death of these people. At least that's what we're being told. But Charles Manson was not on location. He did not do anything himself. And yet he is the worst serial killer ever, they say. Absolute nonsense. The guy had done nothing. Instigated mass murder, maybe. That is what he could be, that he could be found guilty of, if that is correct. But otherwise than that, and Charles Manson is also a very bizarre individual. If you notice, he has sort of like the swastika tattooed in his here in the forehead. If you look at that tattoo, it keeps changing over years. It's like one time the angle is like that, then the angle
Right.
is like this, then it's like I'm like, what's going on here? Because normally tattoos don't move around.
Mm.
We're in a world of illusions. We're in a world of deception.
So, do you think that most of these groups during that era were, at least to a certain degree, created by these intelligence agencies? Because it doesn't seem like, even if you look at the music industry today, or more like 10 years ago, it's almost impossible for any group that doesn't already have connections, isn't already famous, wasn't born into some of these families, to actually become successful in the music industry. So it would make a lot of sense that these groups were just created, and that's how they found success so quickly.
I can say I don't like generalizing, but the ones that came out of Laurel Canyon, if not all, then a major part was exactly from that. Maybe later on, when Laurel Canyon became famous for generating rockstar, then you have wannabes that would, of course, come to the area. So you that would be a natural phenomena. But the starting and the promotion of all of these things, how they avoided drafting, how they all these things, and the record labels, how they just picked them up. All of that would, I would strongly suggest, connected to the CIA. And the whole hippie movement started in Laurel Canyon. There were seven people in one house. They started the whole thing that was the hippie the whole hippie era was started from one person, seven people, and they started dancing like that, dressing like this in the clubs of LA, the clubs that started appearing, and then that through the Monterey festivals and the LSD trips and all of that, it just exploded, and suddenly we had this whole thing called the hippie movement. It was no movement at all. It was like an injected thing into the whole thing to just they call it mind expanding. I agree, LSD is mind expanding, but it's also it makes you lose connection with this reality, whatever this reality is.
Mm.
So a major part was created out of this, and I also think that this was the entry. of the CIA into the music business on a whole different level.
Mhm.
But it's when you say the CIA is just an organization. It's just an agency for hire, the Central Intelligence Agency, an agency. You can rent them. Many of the big multinational corporations rent this agency to go in and commit coup d'etats or military coups or get rid of whoever is standing in front of them. Like um to open up countries, to open up new markets, and so on. And so the CIA nowadays in Hollywood, I mean, they even got their own office there. It's not and they're there as advisors,
Mhm.
and they're there as all of these. It's out in the open now, but you have a whole different layer underneath that we don't see.
Mm. These MK Ultra experiments, they've been being implemented on a mass scale for a very long time through much of what we've discussed through our entertainment industry. But now we have these levels of technology that back then couldn't have even been imagined. It makes me wonder to what degree these mind control operations are being implemented through our technology. As you said earlier, a large part of this was about drugs, about getting people into a state of mind where they can't fight against the system, where they don't care. And that's still there, but we have these levels of degeneracy that's being promoted, this mental illness that's being normalized through these industries. So these mind control operations have now seeped deeply into our technological era, and it's so widespread that people just think it's a normal part of our lives now.
Normalizing is one of the key elements of mind control.
Mm.
Do you know the when you look at the original patents for a television, a TV set, it's part of how to manipulate and control the viewer's mind. It's called TV
Mm.
programs. Okay, is that just a coincidence? I would say please put a question mark at least around that whole thing, and then also see how the television uh or television, like the whole thing, how much, how many hours per day are you in front of it? How many hours per day am I in front of it? When I'm not in front of the TV, am I in front and on a, am I in front of any other screens, digital screens that could be messed with, manipulated? And I would say,
Mhm.
yeah, massively, massively. And so once upon a time, many years ago, there was a film called Soldier Blue. Soldier Blue uh, was the first movie ever where where they showed the impact of a bullet to a human body. Where up until then, if somebody was shot, yes, you squashed a bit of ketchup there, and that was it. Boom, oh, and they fell over. You didn't see blood, you didn't see anything like that. In Soldier Blue, boom, you saw the impact
Mhm.
of. It was a Western movie, and people were puking. I mean, people were being taken out of the cinemas, like they fainted, they puked, all of these things because we were not used to it. We were not. I remember it was Buffy Saint Marie, who now turns out not to be part a native Indian. I mean, there's another one for you. It's like, come on, what's real? But anyway, so we were shown reality and people couldn't handle it at all. It was like this. Now you take the chain massacre, blood, whatever, motor, and put in front of a 3-year-old, the 3-year-old won't even
Oh, just look at
react.
some of the hip
So
hop
we've
and
been
rap music videos that are out there. It's total Satanism and debauchery. That's all it is.
we've been so desensitized to these things, also through video games. My
Mm.
God. So so many good gamers have been recruited over into the drone
Mm. Right.
and then the military drones where you're sitting like playing games in front of a computer game, but suddenly you got live live targets. And I would strongly suggest that we're even taking that whole thing has been taken to a whole new level where the so-called elite, or I have other words for them that are not that very nice.
Parasites.
But anyway, are using it for human hunting. I mean, where this is like the ultimate hunting game live, where you like we have thousands of drone attacks in Afghanistan, for instance, still to this day, thousands. Why? What have Afghanistan ever done? Yeah, 9/11. There was no connection with Afghanistan
Yeah.
at all. The first war in Afghanistan, what was that? Drug war. And then you had all of Iraq, the two wars that built on absolute lies, not a true word anywhere. So why the drone strikes? Why do they continue? Because I would strongly suggest we're looking at live video games for the elite, the ultimate hunting games where they're shooting at live footage, live targets. You even have, I have photos of Obama and Michael sitting in front of the screen smiling, just firing away.
Yeah.
So all of these drone strikes has nothing to do with military targets. They're most civilians. It's like anything moving, kill the fuckers, and get a thrill out of it. We're getting off track here, and at the same time, we're on the same track. So nowadays, the desensitizing of us from Soldier Blue, where like that, and people were fainting. Now it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna have another slice of pizza. While, yeah, tell me when they cut the throat and stuff like, yeah, take out the body, and people don't even react. And this is, you see now in the streets, somebody's lying in the street.
They're filming
bleeding,
them.
They just step over him. They don't, yeah, they're filming him like, yeah, whatever. Desensitized. And in one way, Chris, I tell you, in one way, this is good because we've been the level that where we could be scared before, people don't get scared anymore. So for them, the people behind the scenes that are trying to control us, the only weapon they really have against us is fear. But now when we're being desensitized to things that scare us, it's getting really hard for them because it used to work with like their own Zika virus, patented in 1947, owned by the CDC, that ate the brains of babies. I mean, you can't really up that,
Yeah.
After that one, what are you going to top it with? What if when people start getting used to, yeah, it can eat the brains of babies, how can you, and since then they've had problems, they're trying many different areas and now new viruses, really real. Yeah, you need to get vaccinated or else. How many jabs do I need? Like I've already pumped my child with 72 of them. How many is needed? It doesn't work anymore. So in one way, this desensitive thing is in our favor now, even though it's something that I absolutely do not recommend. So it's good to be desensitized to bullshit and to be able to look through it. And then on your own, activate your heart and your emotions again and get back in touch with what is real. Because if you don't think that you've been mind controlled, I tell you, yeah, right. And I have been accused of being mind controlled, but unaware. So I am unaware but mind controlled, and I'm saying that is it's possible for sure because I'm unaware. As far as I know, I'm not. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, but what is not mind controlled at this time? How? Because what does that even mean? It just means that we react in a certain way, boom, and we react in a way that they would prefer us to.
Yeah. It's
Boom, there's a virus. I tell you, I would suggest that, boom, there's a virus. Everybody that went and took the jab without really looking into what was in it, mind control. Anyone that pushed this on their children without even knowing what's in them. Even I would strongly suggest any parent, responsible parent, that has jabbed themselves and the kids with so many of these without really looking into what's in them. Mind
Yeah.
control.
We have to be very discerning about everything that we interact with because it's all been designed to corral us into certain directions, keep us in certain boxes, not looking at certain things. But like you said, there's a large group of us that are starting to wake up, and the desensitization is working against them in certain ways, and we're becoming aware, not easily as frightened by bullshit, which is good. So we're in extremely interesting times either way. We've got a few minutes left. Any closing thoughts about Laurel Canyon or anything else we discussed?
Love the music.
That's one thing, man.
Love
I
many.
still have to enjoy a lot of that music that came out
Yeah,
because it's great.
I'm not saying it's great
Yeah.
music. I would just say that the way these operations work is it's compartmentalized. People only know their little part, meaning that most of these people that were part of this thing weren't even aware of that they were being manipulated. Just like you have any artist, they do their stuff, but there's a record company behind them deciding everything, including what they're going to have for breakfast. That's part of the whole deal that many have signed. Yeah, but they did this video. Yeah, it was satanic and Illuminati. Do you think that the artists themselves had any say whatsoever in the marketing or any like that? If they have, if it's their own record label, if the then yes. I even had a friend of mine. He used to play for together with Roxette, which is one of the biggest band ever. He said he had no idea. He had no idea that they were being controlled. He was part of a very successful band before that. He had no idea. Now, when he look at their own record labels, you know, the covers of the records, he said, "Oh my God, it's Illuminati signs and all of these." Had no idea. And then also they was. He said it was so strange because they were super popular in with the radio stations, but not really with the audience. How does that go? Because normally you should be that, and then they play on the radio. And so boom, when they were not useful for them, and they just dropped the band. And I also want to point out, where are all the bands now? Have you seen any in the top 100? Where are the bands? We're talking about solo
Right.
artists. One, 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 one. One of the reasons is that they're so much easier to
Yes.
control. And if you look at like, if you don't know mind control, Taylor Swift, I mean, look, did she have the top 10 positions of the charts at one time? Listen to the songs. Is there anything of value there at all? No. So it's like, what are these charts? It's mind control.
Hmm.
What are the numbers? I mean, look at YouTube. Well, it's got 3.4 million views. It must be good. I released a song a few years ago together with a super musician in Spain. It's called Mo Anton. It's called Wake Up, and please look it up on YouTube. Wake Up. Anyway, it was really interesting. We released it on 9/11 on that day, and it went straight to number one in Germany. It stayed in a 100, one of these charts, top 100. It stayed there straight for 2 months, meaning that it's not only me that thinks it's a good song. I really, really feel very strongly about it. I feel it's much bigger than the people who were involved in it. It came in a beautiful way. Anyway, to us. So that thing, it went up to 145,000 views or something like that on YouTube, like that, boom. And it was just going like this. And then suddenly it started going backwards. So I was like, wait a second. It was just because I was interested in like, yeah, what about tomorrow? You know, my own ego trip there. And I started seeing there's 5,000 views less than yesterday. Please explain to me, how is that physically possible that 5,000 people have not, that saw it yesterday, have now not
Yeah.
seen it? And so in the chat, I pointed it out, and people started really following it in the chat. So you can see, I checked the numbers here at this time, and now it's like this. Now I checked the time here. So whatever is on YouTube, please understand that that is not a free platform. You don't. I mean, there's a reason why people like me were shut down so many years ago
Same here.
for just saying what. What did I say? Have I ever said anything violent? Have I ever said anything racist? Have I anything? No. Boom, like that. And so when you see the number of something like Taylor Swift just released this, and it's like 18.5 million, how does that happen? Somebody on a keyboard with access to the website. What? How much? 16 million? No. 18. Yeah, put 18. 18 and 18 and a half, 18 and a half, enter, boom. That's it, boom, you got yourself a global hit.
At least the music of the 60s and 70s was good. The lyrics were intelligent. It took talent to create this. Now you're just pressing buttons. You got vocal altering software. There's no more talent involved, and it's just a pretty sad scene overall.
I mean, I'm a musician. I've been playing my whole life, and I love that, just sitting in the studio on my own. And now it's like I've just lost it, because you can just press one button, create a hit song sounding like this. I want this in the background and chorus and all of this. And now please enter, boom. 34 seconds later, something that sounded better than it would have taken me years.
Yeah.
What just happened? This whole AI is just like, I don't know. It's like extremely useful and extremely dark at the same time. I don't really know how to deal with it, because
yeah, super interesting times we're in. Ole, thank you so much. Definitely looking forward to next time. I'd love to get into the Beatles and some of the other research that you're doing. One more time before you go, the website is Dammegard.com, correct?
Yeah. And I also want to say, if this is January the 8th, it's the 90th birthday of Elvis. He's still around. We can do another show on him if we haven't done that already. That is a beautiful human being.
Yeah, we did. The last time you were on, we
guy,
talked about Elvis.
Okay, I'm happy that we did
Yeah.
that. So, Bob, Elvis, whatever you want to call yourself, if this is, I think it's the 8th of January, happy, 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 happy birthday. And I really wish that you can step forward soon, because the reason you had to stage your own death was because of bravery. And so I really salute you.
Right
So
on.
happy birthday.
Excellent. Ole, thank you so much. We'll do this again soon. And until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.